Mamaham iti manyate. Bahurupa iva bhati. Mayaya bahurupaya. Ramamano guneshvasya. Mamaham iti manyate. Bahurupa, multi-forms. Iva, as it were. Abhati, manifested. Mayaya, by the influence of the exterior energy. Bahurupaya, in multifarious forms. Rammamanaha, enjoying as it were. Guneshu, in the modes of different qualities. Asyaha, of the external energy. Mama, mine. Aham, I. Iti, thus. Manyate, thinks. Translation. The illusioned living entity appears in so many forms offered by the external energy of the Lord. While enjoying in the modes of material nature, the encaged living entity misconceives, thinking in terms of I and mine. Purport. The different forms of the living entities are different dresses offered by the illusory external energy of the Lord, according to the modes of nature. According to the modes of nature, the living being desires to enjoy. The external material energy is represented by her three modes, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. So even in the material nature, there is a chance of an independent choice by the living entity. And according to his choice, the material energy offers him different varieties of material bodies. There are 900,000 varieties of material bodies in the water, 2 million vegetable bodies, 1,100,000 worms and reptiles, 1 million forms of birds, 3 million different bodies of beasts, and 400,000 human forms. Altogether, there are 8,400,000 varieties of bodies in different planets of the universe, and the living entity is traveling by so many transmigrations according to different modes of enjoying spirit within himself. Even in one particular body, the living entity changes from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to youth, from youth to old age, and from old age to another body created by his own action. The living entity creates his own body by his personal desires, and the external energy of the Lord supplies him the exact form by which he can enjoy his desires to the fullest extent. The tiger wanted to enjoy the blood of another animal, and therefore, by the grace of the Lord, the material energy supplied him, the body of the tiger, with the facilities for enjoying blood from another animal. Similarly, a living entity desiring to get the body of a demigod in a higher planet can also get it by the grace of the Lord. And if he is intelligent enough, he can desire to get a spiritual body to enjoy the company of the Lord, and he will get it. So the minute freedom of the living entity can be fully utilized, and the Lord is so kind that he will award the living entity the same type of body he desires. The living entity's desiring is like dreaming of a golden mountain. A person knows what a mountain is, and he also knows what gold is. Out of his desire only, he dreams of a golden mountain. And when the dream is over, he sees something else in his presence. He finds in his awakened state that there is neither gold nor a mountain, what to speak of a golden mountain. The different positions of the living entities in the material world under multifarious manifestations of bodies are due to the misconceptions of mine and I. The karmi thinks of the world as mine, and the jnani thinks I am everything. The whole material conception of politics, sociology, philanthropy, altruism, etc., conceived by the conditioned souls, is on the basis of this misconceived I and mine, which are products of a strong desire to enjoy material life. Identification with the body and the place where the body is obtained under different conceptions of socialism, nationalism, family affection, and so on and so forth, is all due to forgetfulness of the real nature of the living entity, and the whole misconception of the bewildered living entity can be removed by the association of Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, as all this is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And again the translation. The illusion living entity appears in so many forms offered by the external energy of the Lord. While enjoying in the modes of material nature, the encaged living entity misconceives, thinking in terms of I and mine. Translation and purport. By His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kadam Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvashe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. We heard now a very nice text and a very nice purport, very much in the mood of preaching almost. These texts we hear, and it's things that we feel like we've heard so many times. These are the basic sort of fundamentals, if you will, especially in preaching. We'll find actually if you listen to early lectures by Srila Prabhupada, like the early 60s, he would be preaching and it would be very, very much speaking things like Krishna is, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, meaning Krishna is the source of all the avatars, and there's lots of discussion of Leela and all the sweetness of Krishna. But later on, Srila Prabhupada then, he marched to the main concept of you are not this body, you are spirit soul. Srila Prabhupada shifted the theme almost of his classes, and the reason why is because this is much more appealing to a person who's never even heard of Krishna. What do they care of hearing of Krishna's sweetness, of Krishna's qualities, of the beauty of Krishna? They do not care so much. Ooh, but you're not this body. That's very cool. That's very appealing. And so we'll hear like this. And we'll think, maybe, so stuff like this is outreach. This is basics. I've heard so many times, you are not this body. Again, I'm hearing it so many times. I already know all of these things. But practically, Srila Prabhupada, he was once asked by Jayadvaita Maharaj. So we know Jayadvaita Maharaj is at least, not anymore, he's resigned, but he was in charge of the BBT for a while. And so Jayadvaita Maharaj, he asked Srila Prabhupada about the volumes of printing certain books. He was asking about how many Krishna books should we print, how many Bhagavad Gitas should we print, because obviously they don't want to print too many and then have a problem, don't want to print too less and then have the opposite problem. So he was asking all of these quantities. And he said, and then he was asking clarifications from Srila Prabhupada. And he said, let us only print a small amount of Nectar of Instructions. Let us print only a small amount of Upadeshamritas. Why? Because how will it scare people away? What effect will it have? If we stop somebody on the road and give them a book and they open up and what do they read? Vachu Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam. They hear the Krishna consciousness. One should restrict the senses. All these things. Surely we should give them a Krishna book or a Bhagavad Gita which has some cool philosophy or something before we hit them with sense control like this. And what was Srila Prabhupada's response? Srila Prabhupada said, With my books, it is not that they are books for the outsiders or for the insiders. My books are for everyone. So in that case, the point was that we should not necessarily hide away. Let the Brihad Mridanga play whatever rhythm it wishes. Actually, it is not our potency or our clever plans, ultimately, that allow people to be called to devotional service. Obviously, we do like to put clever plans in action, but those clever plans are more an expression of our sincerity rather than out of necessity. Ultimately, it is the mercy of the spiritual master and Krishna that provides success in such endeavors. However, the point of that was almost the inverse of the point that I was going to make, which is that as much as it can be said that what we say among ourselves we can also say to them, in the same way what we say to the apparent outsider is also very much what we need to reiterate to ourselves. We may have heard how many millions of times that we are not this body, that we are trying to exercise this material body in so many different endeavors, so many different endeavors of sense gratification. We can hear so many times. But how many times do we need to hear before we ultimately realize it? It's very, very far away before one ultimately begins to understand that they are not this material body, that they're not acting on the platform of I and mine. So many people have been practicing devotional service for decades, and still they struggle with these things. So then, how much must we hear it? Especially so, because what else is there to hear? We may feel, okay, now I'm practicing devotional service. Now I've picked up a Bhagavad Gita. Maybe now I've been initiated. Now I can stop hearing I'm not this body, and I can start hearing I am a Manjari. I am this person in Vrajalila. I am a direct servant of Srimati Radharani. One might think, now is the time for me to start hearing these things. But actually, it's not. We must continue hearing these things until we are ready to hear those things. And those things are very, very far away. And how do we know this? We can glean this. We can come to understand a hint of this from Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Mahaprabhu, what did he do? When Mahaprabhu was initiated, who was he initiated by? Who was his first initiating guru? Who can tell me? Mahaprabhu's initiating guru, who gave him Diksha, initiation. It begins with E and it rhymes with Shvarapuri. So he's Ishvarapuri. So Ishvarapuri, he gave him initiation. And this Mahaprabhu was not with a shaved head, was not a sannyasi yet, still Grihastha Mahaprabhu. But what happened? After initiation, he came back to Navadvip, and he was chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And like this he was chanting, and he was inaugurating the public Sankirtan mission. Along with his associates, they would go around, and all of Navadvip, suddenly, they weren't hearing about the rules of logic anymore, Mahaprabhu. Before that, he was a teacher of Nyaya. We know there's the 6 Astika, the 6 orthodox schools of Vedic thought. And one of them is Nyaya, which is logic. And they'll come up with these very clever rules on how to assemble a logical argument and all these things. Very, very intelligent. But Mahaprabhu wasn't speaking logic anymore. Now he was speaking on the topic of the glories of the holy name and inaugurating the Sankirtan mission. And so all of the ideas like this, all the apparent basics are being propounded by Mahaprabhu then. Even Mahaprabhu was only dwelling on these points for now. And still there was a lot of opulence even. Even while preaching in the Sankirtan mission, Mahaprabhu was not doing, as he does later on in his pastimes, the very esoteric, tasting the moods of Srimati Radharani. All of these things were not being done by Mahaprabhu in Navadvip so much. Occasionally they were, very rarely. But the majority of the time, Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, he is more Krishna than Srimati Radharani. He's very opulent. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That very much typifies Navadvip. So like this, Mahaprabhu is doing, even after initiation, and after so long directly under the instruction of his Diksha Guru. What did he tell that his Guru told him? His Guru told him that he is a fool. When asked by the Mayavadi sannyasis about the teachings of Vedanta, Mahaprabhu said, my Guru said that I'm a fool, and I'm not qualified to study Vedanta. That person, that same personality in Bhagavad Gita is Vedanta Vid, Vedakrit. Or is it Vedakrit, Vedanta Vid? I always get it mixed up. I always get them mixed around. But either way, the knower and the assembler of the Vedas, he's saying what? He's saying, I do not know it. My spiritual master said I was too foolish. And he says, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalo nasyeva, 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 gatiranyata. That the only means in this Kali Yuga is to chant Hare Krishna. So this is what Mahaprabhu says, under the instruction of his Diksha Guru. He's not speaking of Manjari Bhav. He's not speaking on the mood of Radharani. He's not speaking on these things, and he's not divulging into them. He's not opening them up. Srila Prabhupada never discussed his form in the spiritual world. If anyone is qualified enough to know it, it's Srila Prabhupada, and surely Srila Prabhupada knew it. But for his entire pastime, he never divulged it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur only in one letter ever referred to his form in the spiritual world. The rest of the time, what was he discussing? He was smashing Mayavadis, smashing the academic, the mundane, secular intellectuals. This is what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was doing. He was proclaiming the authority that Gauranga Mahaprabhu has over all Vaishnavas. This was what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was doing, establishing that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He wasn't delving in to all of these things. So all of these things which we see as basic, they, in one sense, are fundamental, but they are not very basic. They are essential. They should be delved into. And how does Mahaprabhu's pastimes reinforce this? Because we find, after Mahaprabhu's initiation, after Ishvara Puri initiated him, and he began chanting Hare Krishna everywhere, then later we know, Harivanth Prabhu was saying, Keshava Bharati gave him sannyas. And then, after taking sannyas, he began to travel. And we know he went to South India. And there's two reasons why he went to South India. There's the external reason, and there's the internal reason. Both are typified by a search. We go somewhere if we are looking for something. We don't go somewhere unless we're just unless we've just got a lot of spare time to burn. We don't really go somewhere if we're not looking for something. And Mahaprabhu was looking for two things when he went off to South India. Externally, he was looking to preach the Sankirtan mission more. He was looking for all the souls that he could bring and take home back to Godhead. All of the souls that he could involve in the Sankirtan mission. So in one sense, this purpose can be split into two general purposes. Two sub-purposes, if you will. Firstly, he wished to take all the jivas back to Godhead. So he went to South India. And we know in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur says, all of South India was liberated. All of South India was brought to the path of Vaishnavism by the preaching of Mahaprabhu. So, in this sense, he was successful. And in the other sense, in the other sub-sense, Mahaprabhu wished to spread the Sankirtan mission. Because it is one thing, to bring people back to Godhead, and this is an important thing. But there's the other thing, to burn the whole world, if you will. We know in yagyas there's a sacrificial flame, and we throw whatever we want to fit into the sacrificial flame. And these things are offered in sacrifice to the Supreme Lord. But this Sankirtan yagya, it is also a yagya. But what is its flame? Its flame is the chanting, again, of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is the sacrificial flame of the Sankirtan mission. And it is dovetailing everything in the utilization of Krishna's service. It is the utilization of everything, anyone and everything, in the service of the Sankirtan mission. And so not only is there the purpose of bringing people to devotional service, but also to take the whole world, in this context, to take all of South India at least, and to throw it into the sacrificial flame of the Sankirtan mission. Because unlike the flame of the yajna that we will see performed elsewhere, which can only fit a few grains of rice, maybe a few fruit, a few things inside, this sacrificial flame, it has no limit to its hunger. It can consume the whole world. And by the mercy of Guru and Gauranga, we can pray that it will consume the whole world. And we've seen this so much proven by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, continuing that mood of Mahaprabhu, what did he do? He went out to all of the world. And now a flame that Mahaprabhu spread throughout all of South India, and of course North India and East India before then. Srila Prabhupada spread all around the world. And now the whole world is being burnt up in the sacrificial fire of the Sankirtan Yajna. Because the world is being burnt up. This sounds aggressive. This sounds destructive. And it is destructive. Because the Sankirtan Yajna destroys all material conceptions that we have. The karmi's idea of mine is burnt away. And the jnani's idea of I am everything is also burnt away. This Sankirtan Yajna burns away all material conceptions. But unlike how the Mayavadis wish it to be, that I stop existing, no longer will I exist anymore, that my individuality must also be burned away. They'll say like this. The Buddhists, the Zen Buddhists, they'll have all these meditations. They'll say, I look into the pond of water and I see my reflection. And then there's this thing called the koans. I don't know if you've heard of Zen koans. Zen koans are these Japanese Buddhist poetry. Sometimes they're like haikus. And they'll meditate on this. Instead of japa on... Some Buddhists, they do some japa, it's all speculation, but that's what their main form of meditation is. So you'll see Zen Buddhists, they sit down, and they're thinking of these Zen koans. And these Zen koans, they're meant to be ideas, poetic representations of Satori. Satori is what the Zen Buddhists call nirvana, of Satori. And if they meditate enough on this, it'll break their brain, and their ahankar will be destroyed. Not in the sense that we understand that their ahankar will be destroyed so that the true identity will be realized, but just they'll realize they have no identity at all. So some of them, they'll say things like, I look into the pond splashes, I am not there, nor is the pond. And it sounds cool, but it's nonsense. I mean, what does that mean? They'll have all these ideas. There'll be some which are even more vague. There's one, the nun, the Zen Buddhist nun, she walks down the road. She's carrying a pot of water. She looks into the pot of water. She sees the moon. She moves the pot. The moon isn't there. And then she was enlightened. It sounds kind of cool. It makes no sense. And they'll say, oh, it will make sense if you meditate on it. But practically it doesn't. It's all just the impersonalist understanding. But that is not our understanding. And our understanding is more holistic, and it is more realistic, and it is greater. In every sense, it is the higher understanding. Because it is not that we think after the ahankar is burnt away, after I and mine is burnt away, that suddenly all of our propensity has gone away. We may think like that, but that is not sustainable. What is the soul? Sometimes it's called jiva, other times it's called atma. And atma, sometimes it's translated as what? It's translated as the self. Why? Because in Sanskrit, atma actually just means I. You can also use the word atma in this sense. Not every time you read the word atma in Sanskrit does it mean the spirit soul, the self. Often it can just mean I. Because what is the nature of the Atma? There are a few qualities that are given by our previous acharyas about the qualities of the spirit soul. It is self-effulgent. It doesn't need anything else in order to illuminate its consciousness. The body does. The body cannot be conscious of itself. The body needs the soul in order to be conscious of itself. But the soul doesn't need anything else. So it's self-effulgent, like a light. Many other qualities. It can never fully come into contact with material nature. Things like this. But the main one that's identified is that it has the potency. It has a very specific potency, and that is the potency of identification. No matter how much we try and burn away material identifications, it is just the inherent nature of the soul to want to say I, to want to identify with something. It is the nature of the soul to want to identify with something and to do something. And so, the Krishna conscious understanding is not that we burn the soul's misidentification away and then we leave it there. Because otherwise, there needs to be, what does the Bhagavad Gita say? Param drishtva nivartate. There needs to be a higher taste, a higher conception of individuality. And we'll come back to that point later on, but I want to get back to the point of Mahaprabhu. So, then, Mahaprabhu, he has come for those two reasons in the external reason. To bring back all of those jivas, to find all his devotees, to bring back all those jivas, and then to wash South India in the Sankirtan mission. But what is the internal reason? Mahaprabhu has gone also for a search, and also to find someone. But he has gone to find himself. Mahaprabhu, he has gone on an existential quest. Mahaprabhu, he wants to find who am I. He wants to find these deep things. Because Mahaprabhu did not, as some people like to, rush into it. I'm initiated, I've done all these things, now I can dive into understanding who I am in the spiritual world. No, Mahaprabhu takes a while. And who does Mahaprabhu go to learn it from? Who is his Shiksha Guru in South India? No. Ramananda Rai. So Ramananda Rai is Mahaprabhu's Shiksha Guru in South India. So he goes to his Shiksha Guru, and it is from his Shiksha Guru, well into his, pastimes of spiritual life. We can't actually say well into his sadhana, because he's a Supreme Personality of Godhead. He doesn't really have a sadhana or a siddha to achieve. But in one sense, he does have a sadhana. Because what is sadhana? There is sadhana and there is sadhya. A sadhana is just the means by which we achieve the goal. And Mahaprabhu is trying to achieve a goal. He wants to understand, who am I? What is my nature? Krishna is going. He is traveling around on the quest to discover himself, to discover these deep truths. But again, he did not learn this for Ishvara Puri. Not because Ishvara Puri could not have given him this knowledge. Ishvara Puri is coming from the line of Madhavendra Puri. And Madhavendra Puri, besides Mahaprabhu and Srimati Radharani, and including Mahaprabhu on that list is almost cheating because Mahaprabhu is Srimati Radharani. Besides those two, it is only Madhavendra Puri who fully understands the heart of Radharani. So it is not that Ishvara Puri couldn't have told him. But in order to set the proper example, Mahaprabhu goes and he learns the high things from Ramananda Rai, not from Ishvara Puri, not from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he is Lalita Sakhi. He knows very well also these internal things. But he waits, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was always there in Navadvip. Actually, there's a deeper purport, but it's a bit rasic. Actually, I'll say it. There's a deeper purport why Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and because he mentioned Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, why Mahaprabhu did not take Shiksha from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya on these topics. Because Lalita Sakhi, she is very qualified to teach these things. I mean, we know she's we know there's the Chatur Vyuha, there's the Chatur Vyuha expansions. Srimati Radharani has her Kaya Vyuha. She has her own expansions, but they're a little different. And those are Lalita, Vishaka, so on and so forth. They are her expansions almost. So forget about, I'm not even qualified to say that she is qualified. By nature, Lalita and Vishaka, who is Ramananda Rai, are both qualified to say. Actually, there's some debate. Some acharyas will say that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is Vishaka. Others will say that Ramananda Rai is Vishaka. Sometimes they get switched around. But Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in the context of the Rai Ramananda Sambad, and always in the context of serving Srimati Radharani. They will always make the point that Ramananda Rai is Vishaka. So from here we can understand, at least in this context, this identification is made. Gorgana Desha Deepika, which is the normal text, which gives the list, flips it around. But anyways, that's a bit of a tangent. So the reason why Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, oh, not Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, what am I saying? Pardon? I'm not Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, I've confused myself now. There's Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya. No, what's the associate? There's the two in the Gambhira. There's Ramananda Rai and there's Sarup Damodar. So why didn't he, sorry, this whole time I've been saying Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, I meant Sarup Damodar. So Sarup Damodar, he's also available. So all that I've been saying about Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya applied to Sarup Damodar. So Sarup Damodar, he was available all the time in Navadvip. He was a childhood associate, almost, of Mahaprabhu. And he was Lalita, not Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya. Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya is Brihaspati. Yeah. So Sarup Damodar, he was available the whole time, but Mahaprabhu didn't go to learn these things from him. Again, for two reasons. One is Navadvip, he's showing this is how we must act when we are engaging in the Sankirtan. This is how we begin to make ourselves qualified. This is how we begin to enter into these high things. And so, Sarup Damodar, it would be breaking the idea, not to rush into it. It must be a long journey before we enter into hearing these high things. This is one reason. And this is very much in line with the reasoning that I was giving. Because again, he went to a Shiksha Guru to learn all these high things. Now, one Shiksha Guru who reveals all these high things eventually, when we are qualified to hear, may be one Diksha Guru. It also may not be. But the idea is, it comes with later Shiksha. It does not come at the time of initiation. Some people will do like this. At the time of initiation, they'll say all of these high things. But this is not the example Mahaprabhu is given. It's not necessarily wrong. If the disciple is qualified, then it's up to the spiritual master. But generally speaking, Mahaprabhu has given us the standard, not to hear these things immediately after initiation. But the other reason why is because Lalita and Vishaka, there's a difference between them. Lalita is a bit older than Srimati Radharani. So we hear in the Vraj pastimes, Lalita sometimes she'll chastise Srimati Radharani. And she'll say, hey, why are you with that Krishna? That Krishna is such a rascal. He's always mistreating you. Go find another guy. There's so many fish in the sea. And like this. Obviously, she's not thinking this. This is in the pastime. Krishna finds it sweet that they're getting angry with Krishna. And increases sweetness of the pastime. Because Lalita, she's a little older, so she almost teaches Srimati Radharani. But Vishaka, who knows Vishaka's appearance day? Vishakashtami. When do we celebrate Vishakashtami? Does anyone know? It's actually a trick question. Because we don't celebrate Vishaka's appearance day. Why? Because she's born at the exact same moment as Radharani. At the exact same moment they're born. Radhashtami is Vishakashtami. The appearance day of Srimati Radharani is the appearance day of Vishaka. So because of this, they are one and the same in the mood. Every mood that Srimati Radharani has, Vishaka almost always seems to echo. Even though Lalita and Vishaka, those are the two closest friends of Srimati Radharani. Lalita comes advising Radharani, sometimes has a slightly different mood, but Vishaka always has the same mood. So because Mahaprabhu's identity is that of Srimati Radharani, he's learning from that person who most fully is in line with Srimati Radharani's mood. He's learning from that personality these things, because that is the most appropriate person to learn from. Which is why he did not learn from Sarup Damodar. Not Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya. I got mixed up when I was making that point. But anyways, that's a side point. But the main point is, that we do not enter into these things immediately. Mahaprabhu at the point of initiation, what did he do? He was chanting, preaching. And what did he say? All the way along, traveling through South India before he reached Ramananda Rai. And then he went on further, of course. Actually, because of course Ramananda Rai, he is only a bit south of Puri. He's not so far into the south. But then of course Mahaprabhu, he goes deep into the south. But what does he say? We know Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur, he describes in the 7th chapter of Madhya Lila. He describes how Mahaprabhu would go everywhere and preach. And he would say, these pastimes are exactly how Mahaprabhu acted all the time throughout his entire tour. And what would he say? We know we have the Kurma Brahmin and we have the Vasudev leper. And in both cases, different problems. I don't have time to go into the pastimes. I want to make some other points. But famous pastimes, we have some idea of them. And in both cases, both of them were begging Mahaprabhu. They were begging Mahaprabhu for different things. The Vasudev leper was saying, please do not let me get an ego. Do not let me develop pride. That the Supreme Personality of Godhead has had so much mercy on me. The Kurma Brahmin, he was saying, please do not let the waves, the tsunami, the drowning influence of Grihastha life, do not let it drown me. This is what he was saying. And what did Mahaprabhu say to both of them? He said actually the same advice. Two completely different problems. Two completely different issues. And yet he gave the same advice. What was that advice? It was to chant the names of Krishna by preaching. So to preach and to study the Shastras. So chant and preach, chant and preach, chant and preach, chant and preach. Again, this is the basis. So Mahaprabhu was saying like this. He wasn't saying, meditate on your form, Srimati Radharani's associate, or something like this. The whole time he was making very clear. And then when Mahaprabhu went to Ramananda Rai, to his Shiksha Guru, to hear these things later on in his spiritual life, what did he do? They went into a secluded area, far away from everyone else. What did Mahaprabhu do at one point? Ramananda Rai was speaking very high things. Mahaprabhu closed his mouth. He said, don't speak anymore. What if somebody hears? What if even the creepers, what if even the creepers, all of the insects, what if the plants? These things are so private, we should be careful that even they do not hear. So even when Mahaprabhu himself, and of course Mahaprabhu is always qualified to hear, even when Mahaprabhu in his pastimes was qualified to hear, he made it very, very important that others would not hear. Because these are very, very high things. So instead, to come back to the point as I began it, we should not think that to hear these things, that we are here because we have the enjoying propensity. We should not think that these are basics. Actually, these things are the things which qualify us to hear the highest things. But first we should be qualified to hear them. First we should be qualified to hear these things. We should not think, I've heard it once, therefore I understand it. That is also not the way of Vedic knowledge. Vedic knowledge is not, I can repeat to you a sentence, I'm not this body, and therefore I know it. Vedic knowledge is one of realization. Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam. First we hear Shravanam, then we meditate upon it, we digest it, Mananam, and then we realize it, Nididhyasanam. When there is Nididhyasanam, when there is realization that I'm not this body, then we can start thinking of what body we are. Because if we do not, if we do not know what body we are not, we will project, we will interpret our spiritual identity in terms of this body we have now. And we will think of all these high things, our form in the spiritual world. We will think of all of these things, and what will we think? We will think it's like the body I think I am now. This body that I think I am now, made of pus and stool and urine and fats and all of these things, we'll think, oh, our body there is like that. Or maybe we'll have a higher understanding, but still not the highest, not the most proper understanding. And we'll think, oh, it's a special body. But deep down, the fundamental reason we are here is, as Srila Prabhupada says, we use our minute independence in order to exercise our enjoying propensity. And exercising our enjoying propensity, that is expressed as lust. And so we will think, I have a spiritual body, but what will I use it for? I'll use it to express my own desire for sense gratification. And thinking that we will completely corrupt and corrode and destroy our understanding of the higher things. Because we will interpret the higher things from our very, very low perspective. And because of that, it is not that these are basics. It is not that these are ABCs, and now that we think we know them, now that we've heard them a million times, let us hear them a million times more. How many hundreds of times Mahaprabhu would hear from Gadadhar Pandit, I believe. He would hear Dhruv Katha of Dhruva Maharaj. He would hear the Katha of Prahlad Maharaj. These are not rasik pastimes. These are not pastimes that are, Raj Leela, all of these intimate pastimes. They are not. But Mahaprabhu has heard them and relished them because they teach us so many things that we need to know in order to enter into those pastimes. If Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna himself, is doing those things, then what to speak of us? So these are not ABCs. So we should try to come to understand these things. And that is why we have been given this material body. Sometimes people will say, Krishna, he is so unfair. Why has Krishna put me here? Krishna, why would he do this to me? They will feel like that. They'll say, nonsense. Krishna, what a terrible person. But actually, even when we are here, we are just reaping the mercy of Krishna. Krishna is so merciful, so sweet. We want to enjoy separate from him. There we go. We've received empowerment to do so. We know Srila Prabhupada is what? A Shakti Avesh avatar, yes? He's an avatar empowered by the Shakti of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But actually we are all Shakti Avesh. We are all actually empowered by the Supreme Lord. Not just Srila Prabhupada. We are all empowered. The difference is Srila Prabhupada is empowered by the internal potency, and we are empowered by the external potency. We are empowered by the external potency to fulfill our false dream of the golden mountain, of being independent, of being the enjoyer. This is what we are empowered to do. Srila Prabhupada is empowered by the sweet internal potency of the Lord in order to preach the glories of Sri Krishna and Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu all around the world. And we are empowered by the external potency in order to try and taste our futile and pathetic attempts to be the enjoyer of this world. Because sometimes we'll think, Srila Prabhupada, empowered to do so many great things. And that is so true. The empowerment of Srila Prabhupada, we cannot even begin to understand. But we say that with the assumption, with a specific assumption. And what is that assumption? That assumption is that that assumption is that there is a baseline of what we can't do. Srila Prabhupada could do all these great things, being empowered by the Lord, and we can only do the normal things that we can do without the Lord's empowerment. And again, this reveals how much we are bewildered by Maya. Kartaham iti manyate. This is what the jiva, completely conditioned, believes. He says, I am the doer. He thinks, I am the one who is doing all these things. I am the one who is facilitating all these things. And to a degree we have free will. But that free will is empowered entirely by the Lord. And how is it empowered? So the external potency. So it's not that Krishna has thrown us here and now left us to fend for our own. Krishna has empowered us to do whatever we want with the material potency. He has empowered us like this. It is just that we choose to use that empowerment to continue in the way of suffering and of pain. But if we want to, we can take that empowerment and we can throw it as well into the Sankirtan Yagya. We can throw it as well into that flame. We can burn it as well into that fire. And then that empowerment can maybe become that of the internal potency. Srila Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that the body of the devotee is Chinmaya Sharira. It goes from the Achit Shakti, the Achit Maya, the external potency, and it is suddenly composed by the internal potency when the devotee fully dovetails his existence in the service of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Krishna. So this is the nature of the material world. This is the nature of our empowerment. This is the nature of the I and mine. And so we must go beyond the I and mine. But to go beyond the I and mine requires a lot of dwelling upon it. We should never stop meditating that I'm not this body, all these things, thinking we're very high. We can hear so many high-level things, because otherwise we import so many things. And even among devotees, the proof in the pudding, so to speak. So many devotees will say, you know, I'm not this body, Prabhu. But how many more things will they identify with? Socialism, nationalism, family affection. Actually, it's easy to not be attached to your body, really. Like, it's hard, but it's not the hardest thing. Eventually you can cultivate that. How much harder is it to abandon attachment to nation? To abandon attachment to family? Not that we should be cold to our family. Sometimes in the neophyte understanding we can think this means I should tell my family to go away. I won't associate with filthy karmis. Sometimes they'll interpret like this. But it means not to be attached. One can still express family affection and not be attached to it. That is the difference. But how hard is it to abandon those attachments? Those are very, very difficult. We have so much love for the nation. And we see then so many devotees, they'll still hold on to these ideas. Maybe they'll say, I'm not this body, Prabhu, but they'll still want to follow politics so much. This party will save my nation. This party will not. How many times, if you hear in the Prasadam hall, just vaguely, how often are people talking about Krishna? How often are people discussing, I'm not this body? How often are people moving beyond this understanding of me and mine? Not very often. They're dwelling on, oh, this political party this political party that. Did you hear this person did this person did that? Because these things are very hard to let go of. Our body is almost easy to let go of. But attachment to nation, to politics, to political ideology. And then we find so many devotees. They'll read Srila Prabhupada's purports. And then with all of their ideological attachments that they have, they'll read something Prabhupada says. And they'll say, oh, that doesn't agree with, maybe I'm a feminist, maybe I'm a socialist, maybe I'm a capitalist, maybe I'm a misogynist. Maybe I'm a feminist, maybe I'm a sexist. Either way. They'll have some ideology, and they'll read Prabhupada say something, and they'll say, oh, I cannot agree with that. So then, what is their conclusion? Prabhupada must be wrong. And they won't say this openly. Maybe, sometimes they do, unfortunately. But they'll think it implicitly. And then what happens? Suddenly, ahankar, the conditioned nature, maya, becomes the means by which we understand Krishna through. And how can that be Krishna? Then one is not understanding Krishna. Because they're reading Prabhupada's books to understand Krishna. They are not understanding Krishna. They are understanding Pondrak. Maybe Pondrak they are understanding, but they are not understanding Krishna. They are understanding a false Krishna that they've created in their mind. Pondrak, who so famously told Krishna, hey, you're not Vasudeva, I am the true Vasudeva, I am the true Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what happened? In the court of Dwarka, all of Sri Krishna's court, they laughed. Tears coming out of their eyes. Who was this random person? Who is this random person saying these things? But this is the exact same as those people who would read Srila Prabhupada's purports and then say, actually, no, this is not right. Because they want to understand a false Krishna. They create a false Krishna. And so the devotees must do the same. All we can do is mock such an understanding. All we can do is disregard such an understanding. Because ultimately, if we do not do that, we cannot transcend me and mine. Because we are interpreting spiritual life in terms of me and mine, of I and mine. But ultimately, spiritual life is, as we've discussed, it is about transcending this. And it is about going somewhere else. And what is that place? It is the place where we no longer say I and mine, but we say we. We see the Supreme Lord and we identify with His pleasure. Because we must identify. This is the nature of the soul. And so we see the Supreme Lord and we identify with His joy, with His satisfaction, with His service. This is the ultimate way. This is the ultimate way to use the spirit soul's propensity to identify which it always will have and it will never lose, but to use it in a way that it is permanently situated above understandings of I and mine, it is param drishtva nivartate, because once we identify with pleasing Krishna, there will be no greater joy, because that is our constitutional position. But in order to understand that we need to do that, we must dwell on these things. So as much as we may feel these are the basics, these are the fundamentals. These are fundamentals and basics that we must dwell on perpetually. We must always dwell on these, because otherwise we will not be able to even understand our goal. We will not be able to understand our destination of reawakening our identification as Krishna Nitya Das. And if we cannot keep our trajectory on the right course, then we will not be able to be spiritually successful. So, these basics must always be repeated to ourselves. And this is the and this is why Srila Prabhupada is stressing it so much in his Bhagavatam purports. We should not feel this is some basic here for people who are reading Bhagavatam the first time to understand. This is also here for people who are studying Bhagavatam for the millionth time. This understanding can always be had, so that we do not fall into incorrect understandings, and that we do eventually achieve those high goals with which we hope to achieve under the shelter of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.